So here we have our model. It's a latex skinned polyfoam head, and I've started here with a base coat of latex with a little beige, a little flesh thrown in, and a tad of white just to brighten it back up. You always want to start with a light base coat because it's easier to go light with dark on top than it is the opposite. Then I take out my purple and I start the carotid vein up the neck, and I like to wave it a lot and branch it out from the sides like a tree. And you can use as little or as few of these as you like. It's all a matter of taste. The technique I'm discussing here, you can change the colors and apply to just about any paint job. Next I go in and I start to do a little highlighting, a little veining here and there. Next I go in and I just kind of add veins that, besides the ones that are coming out of the main artery. I also add some extras, a few into the neck, into the face, just things to give it a little bit more life. Looks like there's things coming through the skin. I tend to go over my veins a second time. I like to do the first bit hard and the second one soft, just to give it a little softness around the edges, and because if you look at the veins in your skin, some are soft and some are a little harder because they're closer to the top. I also try to change it up on the other side so the branches are different and you don't have repeats. You want the same basic shape if you're doing a singular piece like this where both sides are mirroring each other, but you don't want it ever to be the same. And now I've taken just a little bit of red, I filled in the eye sockets slightly, going over my veins again, just so that when I start covering them with flesh, now I go in with some burnt umber and I start doing what I call a star pattern. I take the airbrush, and if I was making a star shape, but I keep moving, I don't stop. So you're doing these points, and as the paint gets to the points, it leaves a little more points on the edges, and in between you get some softness. And as you layer the different colors, the dots stand out more, the paint kind of softens into each other, and you get a really layered paint job. It's a little time consuming, but the results are extremely worth it. The size of the pattern is up to you. I like to do mine kind of tight and get a lot of dots. If you do them wider and bigger, like your star is bigger, you'll get a little less of that deep effect, and it'll all come together a little more muddy, but that may be what you're after. The tighter the star pattern, the more translucency it's going to appear to have. I like to do the back of the head with bigger star pattern so that the front's a little tighter, a little sharper, and it draws your attention to it. I take a lot of time going over my veins to push them way back because you just want them to barely come through. You want them to feel like part of a living item. Unless that's the point of the piece, it may be a veiny piece. But if not, I try to cover them with various degrees so parts of the vein stand out and parts don't. Now I take some green and I model over the entire head again with my star pattern, which begins to take the brown and green and make them one. I've now covered the entire head with the green modeling. Next I go into where I've taken a slight bit of red in the sockets and the lips, and I use a little more purple, and I go in and darken the sockets, some around the lips slightly, and fill in some of the sculpted detail with the purple. It helps really emphasize the points of the sculpture, and then once at the end when you go over it with your fleshy layers to push it back, those points will still stand out. This is where I also use the purple to fill in some of the skull-shaped areas of the head and underneath the jawline. Make it a little dark, but as we go lighter with our colors, it'll fill in some and it'll help keep that skull look, which makes him look more zombie-like. I also do a little bit in my neck areas, the muscles on the sides and the Adam's apple area, just to make them pop slightly. Now I'm taking a little more of the burnt umber and going over the purple and some of the darker spaces just to pull it out a bit, make it look a little more fleshy and a little less masky so it doesn't look quite so Halloween mask-like. It's okay at this stage if it feels a little overpainted because you're going to be pushing it back in the end. I also use the burnt umber to darken up any of the spaces I've done for the skull area, and then I work from the front edge back into the head and pull it back some so that it's dragging that color, that purple and the burnt umber, into the back of the head, which makes the face a little more of a focal point and helps give it that skull look. Next, I take a little black and go in and hit a few spots I feel need some excess shading, somewhere that I want to really show through after the fact. You don't want to use much, but it's important to have a few spots that pop. And the next thing I do is I hit the whole thing with just a little blue. It adds a little life underneath. And then I go with a layer of flesh color. It's just enough to let everything come through and still give it some life. The irony is, of course, it's sculpture of a dead guy, but you want it to look like it has some depth to it. Next, I take a white or a light gray, in this case a light gray, and I model over the whole thing, everywhere except the eye sockets. This is what causes the other paints to actually pop and look translucent. It looks as if there's a milky layer on top of the skin that's just see-through. It's amazing how it changes the piece once you add this. Then I go back to my burnt umber, and I just kind of hit it to bring out the flesh from under the white. And I still want to make sure it has an amount of depth to it, and that's what that does. Run the burnt umber over some of the lines and the deep hollows, and Really brings it all together, brings the lights and the darks as one. Don't forget to keep your star pattern going, but with this you want to get a little squiggly with it just to help make it look fleshy. Now I take a really light shade. Sometimes I'll use white, but in this case a light gray because he's not supposed to be alive. And then I'll go over and do one final bit of modeling over the whole surface. If done properly, this is the thing that'll really give it the depth. It's going to look kind of obvious at first, but when we do the next step, it's what'll really bring it out. And remember, when you're modeling, take your time. Don't rush it, especially on the stage with the white. If you get ahead of yourself, you can really make them too big, it won't look as good, and it can muck up the entire paint job that you've spent a long time on. Now I'm going over with just a hint of red, just in the cheeks, the chin, the neck, just a bit to bring out some flesh feel from the white. It takes it down in some places and makes it look less painterly. It makes it look as if the skin's rotted underneath, but it's still a flesh. Now I spray the entire sculpture down with clear coat. In this case, I'm actually using dull coat. But it makes the entire paint begin to pop out. And you can also use a clear 50-50 mixture of latex and water-based polyurethane, otherwise known as perma-wet. And as you see with the finished piece, it brings those colors all together and gives it a nice sheen. Seems to be kind of one. It seems to be alive, yet dead. Just add some eyes and teeth, and your prop is ready to display.